Welcome to another Kundalini After Dark session. I'm your host, Brent Spirit, and today we're talking all about the dark night of the soul. It's always good to be with you all. If you're listening in the archive and would like to join the next live After Dark meeting, the links will all be in the description. You can also find it at brentspirit.com/afterdark. If you're listening in on Spotify and you leave a rating for the show, I really appreciate that. It goes a long way. If you're tuning in on YouTube and you can hit subscribe, like, follow, all that kind of stuff, it helps a lot. Thank you so much. So, Kundalini awakening and the dark night of the soul. So, the dark night of the soul is one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging part of the spiritual journey, right? It's right there in the name, the dark night, the dark night. Now, despite its name, the dark night of the soul, often for most people, myself included, this period spans more than just one night. Unfortunately, for some, it's a weekend. For some, it's a week, 2 weeks, months, years. And I've come across a few people that have been in this sort of period for decades, believe it or not. So right off the bat, if you haven't experienced the dark night of the soul, I'm sharing some pretty heavy stuff there that, yeah, it could last decades. But of course, the aim of us meeting here is to address this. So perhaps, you can move through it a little bit more smoothly, a little bit more efficiently, and it doesn't have to take so long. So the dark night of the soul is usually a period on the spiritual path that follows a series of really high, positive, exciting, beneficial, blissful periods of maybe perhaps connection, maybe perhaps great joy, great contentment, a lot of positive growth, a lot of positive experiences. Following that, often abruptly, there comes the period of the dark night. It can come suddenly, and especially when it comes suddenly, it can be very, very challenging because there's so much contrast, right? So much contrast between, the ups and the downs. So this term, the dark night of the soul, it actually originates from a mystic by the name of Saint John of the Cross. He was a Spaniard, and he wrote about his experience during this phase of the spiritual journey. You can find his work, The Dark Night of the Soul. It's what it's called. I admit I tried to make my way through it. It's a little too sophisticated for me to read, some fancy language and whatnot. But for those that like literature, it's very rich text. I can say that. Now he describes in it his period of the dark night of the soul, and it got some attention because I think he does a pretty good job from what I read and understood about it. Does a pretty good job of describing this period of great difficulty on the spiritual path. Now, of course, as with everything on the spiritual path, everything serves a purpose. It all is here for spiritual development and transformation. So the purpose of the dark night of the soul phase, right? It's to bring us to a point where we can practice equanimity, where we can be equanimous with whatever may arise on our journey throughout our life. So positive experiences, negative experiences, those who make it through the dark night of the soul come to a point where they're easygoing with any type of experience that may arise in life, difficult things, positive things. Ideally, the aim is to bring a person to a point where they have no preferences over one or the other, right? They're totally unconditionally accepting of whatever may arise in life. So this is the aim of the dark night of the soul, right? We go through this period, and eventually, if we can stop fighting, stop resisting, stop judging, and just accept the difficulty, right? We can come to a point of acceptance, we come to a point of equanimity, and that's great spiritual maturity. Now, in my view, the dark night of the soul is captured in the story of Christ when he's on the cross. But in particular, there's a moment where he looks up at the heavens and he says, Father, why have you forsaken me? Right? So he's on the cross, he's dying, he's been nailed. And he looks up at God and says, God, you've let me down. Why have you done this? Right? So if you look at the story of Jesus, his whole life, as far as we know, he's in touch with God. He's saying, I'm the Son of God. He has a great connection with God. He's performing miracles, right? People are following him. Everything is going quite well for him, right? And then suddenly, of course, somewhat abruptly, he ends up on the cross. He's being crucified. And even Jesus in his, as great of a traveler, of a mystic that he was, at his lowest point on the cross, he forgot all of that. And he said, God, you've let me down. You've abandoned me. And his connection to God was apparently, in his view, severed at that time, right? And that's why he was expressing this. So that statement there, Father, why have you forsaken me? I think that captures the dark night of the soul in its essence. So when we're going through this dark night of the soul, there's this strong feeling of being abandoned by the divine, abandoned by God, right? So, like I said, the dark night often follows periods of great spiritual highs. So during those periods of spiritual highs, we feel great connection, right? Maybe there's synchronicity, there's manifestation, all things are going really well. There's bliss in our body. We're making great progress. Maybe we've got great community. We're attracting the right people. And then suddenly it all sort of gets dry, it disappears, and we're alone. There's no more bliss. There's pain maybe in our body. There's fear, right? Maybe we become sick, our relationships fall apart. There's this feeling of, wow, the divine that was supporting me in this beautiful way all this time has now abandoned me. Where did it all go? And that's what, like I said, I think Jesus was expressing when he was on the cross at that point. So during the dark night of the soul, we experience this abandonment by God, by the divine, apparent abandonment, I should say. And then with that, there comes a period of separation, great separation, right? We go from a period of expansion, interconnectedness, communion, union with the divine, to a feeling of separation. And that's where the sense of abandonment comes from, right? And with that can come all sorts of negativity, pessimism, nihilism, cynicism, right? We can feel lost. We can feel misunderstood, right? We can also feel very isolated and abandoned. Perhaps part of the dark night of the soul isn't just the divine abandoning us, it may be our community, right? Our family, our partners, right? For whatever reason, some people just, disappear, right? They push us away for whatever reason, and it can all happen all at once. All of this can happen all at once. So ultimately, the dark night of the soul is, it's uncomfortable, right? It's a period of negativity. Now, how do we navigate this period on the path? Well, it's important here that we are taking a moment to look overall at the map of the spiritual journey, and we see the dark night of the soul is on the map, is a known segment on the journey, right? It's not that something has gone wrong. If you happen to find yourself in this sort of phase where things get a little difficult, they get a little dry in the sense that all the spiritual magic and mysticism and maybe psychic abilities and bliss and joy, all that kind of dries up and becomes kind of like a desert, right? So if you're going through that, it's important to understand that this is a known section, a segment on the terrain of the spiritual journey. And it's actually, in some respects, quite an advanced segment of the journey, quite an advanced segment, because in order to get to the dark night of the soul, you had to have traversed some degree of spiritual development, right? You have to have experienced some degree of spiritual blessings, you could say, in order for that to dry up and then for you to suffer and experience the contrast. So that's one way that we get through the dark night of the soul, is just understanding that this is actually a segment of the journey. And that's why I like to sometimes mention the story of Christ, because his journey, if we look at it as a map, it's our journey, right? It's not just one guy who went through a spiritual journey and got crucified, died, and then, apparently he was resurrected and attained union with the divine. That story is our story. That's a map for what we will go through as we navigate our own spiritual journey, right? So with that said, we maintain faith as best as we can. We maintain some faith. In some twisted way, the God that seems to have apparently abandoned us, in some twisted way, it's, the God, the divine, the source, the divine mother, still there, still has our back in some twisted way that we cannot yet understand, right? So with that faith, with that understanding, that means we continue our spiritual practices, no matter how dry they've become. So maybe we continue our meditation practice, which maybe before it was really awesome and fruitful, but now it's just very dry, very dry. Nothing exciting is happening. It's a drag, it's a slog, but we continue to sit. Right? We continue to sit with faith, knowing that we are still on the map here of the spiritual journey, right? Maybe we make some efforts to just connect with a higher power, right? Just in some way or another, we make a little bit more of a concerted effort. Even Jesus, he talked to God. Still, there was a prayer when he said, Father, why have you forsaken me? It was still a prayer, right? Maybe a prayer coming from a place of victimhood and not out of praise or gratitude, but still a prayer nonetheless. And to me, a prayer is any communication with the divine, even a complaint, a vent. I think that's all prayer, right? during the dark night of the soul, if possible, we can still seek the support of our community, right? Of our friends, our family, whoever it is that is traveling the path with us, right? We can seek their support, and we can continue to operate in an ethical manner, right? Of course, right? No matter what we're going through, it's best to ethically treat ourselves with some degree of morality and ethics. And then, of course, that translates over onto others as well. And that will help us through this phase, right? If we go through the dark night of the soul, doesn't mean we abandon all degree of moving skillfully through the world with an open heart, kindness, etc., right? And ultimately remembering that the journey is not actually about accumulating powers or bliss or gifts or synchronicity or manifestation or abundance or anything like that. It's not what the journey is actually about. So when that stuff comes and goes, it's not a problem. The journey is ultimately about cultivating this sense of equanimity, right? Equanimity. So if you put our focus there and say, okay, how equanimous can I be? How non-attached can I be? That's a bit of a more accurate target to work towards, right? So a little bit about my personal experience with the dark night of the soul. So after my major Kundalini awakening, I had this, energetic explosion back in 2015. Prior to that, I was listening to a lot of Abraham Hicks. The world became just a total playground with manifestation and synchronicity and abundance. I had found myself in a really powerful, spiritually charged relationship, which I, may call a twin flame relationship. It was really, really incredible. My life was amazing, right? I had this bliss flowing through my body. It was just really, really far out, right? And I thought, finally, I made it. All the spiritual work that I had done up until that point, it paid off. Now I can just kind of coast, right? And then suddenly, after this major energetic explosion up my spine, by the very next day, all of the magic that I was experiencing started to completely crumble and dry up, including the relationship. It completely fell apart. All the synchronicity sort of disappeared. All the bliss in my body disappeared, and it became just terror, just horror. There was anxiety. There was tension in my body. There was fear. There was confusion. And there was heartbreak, there was betrayal, there was all sorts of those elements wrapped up in it. Now, in the midst of it, I didn't know I was in the dark night of the soul. I just thought, what the heck, I was having such an incredible time, and now it's gone the complete opposite direction. So it was very, very jarring, very jarring. Now, in my despair, like I mentioned, in my view, prayer is any degree of communication with the divine, with God, with source, whatever you would like to call it. So at that point in my journey, I said the first prayer in probably over a decade. And that prayer was, God, I know you're there because you were blessing me with all of these incredible things only recently, but now you've, completely disappeared and done this to me. Fuck you. And I remember being in the car driving and just saying, fuck you. Why have you done all this to me? Right. And that was my prayer. And I think that was probably the most authentic, heartfelt prayer that I've ever expressed in my life. And I think that captures the essence of my dark night of the soul experience. Now, of course, through that period, I began to discover all the things that I shared with you, that I should continue my practices. If anything, I should lean further into them. So I began to sit and meditate even more. I had developed some practices of self-love. I leaned into them even more. I knew God was there, right? Even though God had, say, abandoned me, I knew that there was some higher power, not necessarily a man in the sky, but just a higher power that I could communicate and relate with, right? So I knew it was there, and I said, okay, it's either you're always there or you're never there. And I had some experiences that show me that you're there. So you're always there. So you're watching me go through this suffering. So maybe I'll keep talking to you. I'll keep the dialogue open. So I would just, have these very heartfelt, genuine conversations with God, in this way, with the divine in this way. Eventually I came to understand the divine through my lens as the divine mother, right? And then I began to relate with her more in a more gentle way, and she began to show up once again in my life, and eventually to say, hey, I never left you. I never left you. I just wanted to bring you to a point of equanimity. And so it's through these self-love practices that I cultivated equanimity, not pushing things away, not clinging, just allowing whatever thoughts, emotions, feelings, sensations, memories to come up within my system. I just allowed it all to come up. So this helped me to mature and to understand the journey is not about, like I said, synchronicity or manifestation or a perfect relationship or anything like that. It's about equanimity, because with equanimity, we can get through anything. We can get through anything at all. Because even when things are really amazing, that's great. But as we know, nothing lasts. And when they disappear, which everything will eventually change, we will suffer. So if we approach life with equanimity, then we're able to move through anything. We're able to enjoy good things fully without clinging, without worry, and we're able to also let them go when they disappear, right? And when difficulty comes, we're able to say, okay, yeah, this is here. Eventually, this too shall pass, and we move through. And that's great maturity. And we get to that point, like I said, by navigating through the dark night of the soul. And in fact, I hate to break it to you, but many people experience multiple dark nights of the soul, right? So I think the spiritual journey is actually a spiral that keeps going round and round and round, expanding outward, right? Like the Fibonacci spiral just keeps expanding outward and outward. But so that was my major dark night of the soul, and that period lasted about 6 months, and then eventually over the next 6 months, began to get a little easier. But I've had some dark nights of the soul that were, weekends, weeks, and for me in particular, many of those dark nights involved being sick. So food poisoning. Somehow I got food poisoning just way too many times in one year. And each time it was just like a spiritual journey. Food poisoning, as far as I know, there's no like cure. There's no medicine you take and it goes away. You just kind of have to ride it out. If there was a cure, nobody told me about it. So I just had to ride it out. And going through those periods, it was like, I'm just alone here with just nothing but pain, nothing but suffering, but nothing but fever, vomiting, all this kind of stuff, right? So I understood, this is a dark night of the soul. Okay, can I make peace with this discomfort? Okay, so I would stay up all night sometimes, just unable to sleep, and it was literally like a dark night. Great suffering happening there. Um, and I'm sure others have their own versions of these sort of dark nights of the soul. Maybe there's things to do with relationships or heartbreak, or maybe there's some natural disaster, or you lose your job, or something like that. Something puts you in a position where you just have to face the darkness, right? And not push it away, and not also long for things to change. You just actually just sit with it to really get to know the darkness, right? So the more that we do that, of course, we develop this sense of equanimity, and we begin to then emerge out of the dark night of the soul. So what are some signs that we're emerging out of the dark night of the soul? Well, what I've noticed in myself and in working with others, and I've watched some people even within this community, I've seen some people I've known for over a year, maybe even more, multiple years. But I've watched people navigate the dark night of the soul, and one day they just show up, and there's just like a glimmer of optimism, of positivity, of a sense of, you know what, I think this is working out. I think this is all starting to make sense. And from there emerges like a sense of courage, a sense of curiosity, a sense of things are getting a little better, but maybe this is a trap, but I'm willing to hang out here and feel okay for now, but maybe it's going to all suddenly go away. So there's a sense of reluctance to really relax into their newfound state of equanimity, right? But it's kind of like a slow emerging out of a cave into the light. You got to kind of tread lightly and kind of get your bearings. But this is what I notice amongst people that are coming out of the dark night of the soul. It's a gradual experience where they kind of look at the world in a new way, with a much more mature way, right? Um, like I said, there's equanimity there. And from there, eventually, as time progresses, people look back and they say, I see why I went through that. It makes sense. And eventually, when you're out of the dark night of the soul, when you can look back at that period and say, I'd go through it again. If I was forced to relive it, I'd go through it again, because it's the only way that I would come to this point where I'm at now, where I have this sense of maturity and trust in life and this degree of non-attachment to whatever comes and goes. We're still in the dark night of the soul if we say, I want this to end. I wish this never happened. We're out of it when we say, okay, it makes sense. I get it. Right. So if we go back to the story of Jesus, once he goes through his resurrection, he's in a state of union with the divine, union with God, right? If you asked him, hey, if you had a choice to not be crucified, what would you choose? He would say, yeah, do it again. Where's the cross? Put me on it, right? That's what he would say. perhaps, probably, right? That's what I would say, right? Put me back and give me food poisoning again, or put me through that whole ordeal again. If it's gonna be what brings me to this point where I'm able to be a little bit more at ease with the flow of life, with the coming and going of life, and whatever arises and passes away. So this is how we can move through the dark night of the soul. Now, I just want to offer a little bit of empathy here. I'm speaking here, right? On paper, it sounds smooth and easy. In practice, it's very, very difficult, right? If somebody were to go to me when I'm sitting in my bed crying and vomiting and shivering and said, "Hey, Brent, this is on the map. You're gonna get through this. It's gonna be okay. Just trust and surrender and practice equanimity." I would have said, "Hey, fuck you." Right. And so I understand if others maybe want to say that to me. I get it. I get it. But the fact that you're listening to this suggests that, part of you is a little curious that, hey, maybe there's something else. Maybe this isn't the end. And there's something, coming on the other side. And I'm here to say, yeah, there is. And there is. This is the oldest story ever told. This is the hero's journey. This is the story that, we're all going through. And the dark night of the soul is not the end. It's not the end. Uh, you know, it's darkest before the dawn, right? And when the dawn comes, it's worth it. It's worth it. So, with all of that said, I want to open the floor up to hear from some others about their dark night of the soul experiences. Topic tonight, of course, is the dark night of the soul, but anything really goes here. I'm happy to hear about anything to do with the spiritual awakening journey. Maybe you've got some questions for myself and the group. I'm going to open the floor up for others to share their wisdom. That's what it's all about. And feel free to get some conversation going in the chat as well. And Teresa's sharing here, I dubbed one of my dark nights my year of the bounce. I love that. Brilliant. Okay. So let's go over here to David.
Certainly relate to your journey too, Brett, and thank you again for opening a space for all of us. What a wonderful gift you're offering. Yeah, in 2005, I crashed. My life had been fine up until then, and I had a successful business, okay, financially. In 2005, my wife was diagnosed with MS, and I started to hit economic troubles, and I was losing $9,500 a month continually, and I thought my world had come to an end. And cut a long story short, I ended up in the bedroom on my knees, bawling my eyes out. I said, okay, there is a God, you show me and I'll play along. I love that book Neil Donald Walsh writes. His book #1, it's still my favourite. And from that point on, everything changed. So what I'd actually had to do was surrender. It got me to a point of coming to that understanding that the ego didn't work and there was certainly a divine intelligence behind all of this. And so I continued to follow intuition and guidance and was led to seminars, teachers, and so on, all about universal law that were just like into itself as drawn, applied it, and then went through exactly what you did, Brent, with manifesting beautifully. Years with Abraham Hicks, and it was just singing along. From one dance to the other, it was just glorious. Then I was meditating on my own up in the snows here in the high country at 2:30 in the morning, just in my jammies with my bare feet in the grass and a beautiful galaxy of stars. And bang, I got hit between my shoulders, like a massive electric hit, like somebody hit me with a cattle prod. I looked around and there was no one there. What the hell's going on? I didn't quite work it out, and I left. I was going to be there for 3 months on my own. Ended up being 8 weeks. I was simply just told to go back, just telepathically. And from that point on, I went into healing for 7 years with a spiritual church. And at that point, after the 7 or 8 years, I started to move with this movement. So the energy was within my body, and unfortunately, it went down a hell of a hole. Because I pointed the bone and suggested the worst, that I was possessed and full of demons and all the classical stuff. It went on for quite a while with churches who had no answers. So I totally surrendered and left all structure. I realized, like you did, that there was a connection, a strong connection with the above. I'll never forget one nice medium who actually said, don't worry about anything else. Simply just go straight to the boss. So I sat with that and I connected and prayed continually with energetic charge behind it from the heart. And what happened was I realized it was Kundalini. So I was led to Ayurvedics and many people, and finally to you. And so I've still had this energy moving for some years now. And I've been guided to write and share what's happened in those years. So this morning, to top it off, I was presented with a clear glass and it had a single tadpole in it. So I'm just suggesting to be very clear and conscious of what your dreams bring you, because in my opinion, it's the divine or Shakti answering. So I had a clear glass of a tadpole and I checked it out this morning. You have not reached your potential. It's a state of transformation or a cycle of life. Now I look back now and realize that I was being prepared for where I want to resonate. So the darkness is taking me through, and I would suggest that most of us, to the point where we can hold more light, where we've chosen perhaps at a higher level, where we choose to resonate. And that really fits. And how can we work with the light or anybody who's in darkness or anything with dark if we can't hold the light ourselves? We haven't experienced it in our own life, in the own states, non-physically and physically. So to me, it's a perfect cycle of understanding the non-physical self and coming to a point of evolving to a degree where we have reached that point of emergency and realizing that every bit of it serves. And to top it off, these lucid travels happen pretty quickly. There was 2 more after the tadpole. There was a brand spanking new car wrapped in undelivered plastic as it comes from the factory. And all the lights are on underneath the plastic. You know, the white sheet that they cover them to stop them from pollution and dirt and so on before they get delivered to the new client. In the left-hand front corner, the indicator was alight. There was a digital 150 showing, so number 150. I checked that out. That also is encouragement. Take action. Finally, there was a lady with a grey cage, which to me represents the darkness, and her beautiful hand was through it. And at the bottom of the cage was a blue and white budgerigar. Budgerigars love to chat. She reached out and grabbed the budgerigar gently, held it in her palm, and it flew onto my right shoulder, and it started chirping away into my right ear. And from then, there was white notepads, scripts or pages with nothing on them, falling from above down onto the ground, or as gravity would take them. So it was a beautiful understanding that my journey, from a personal perspective, is about writing, about sharing, and the whole journey, that it is complete and whole. And these signs, I believe we can all get, and the easiest way where they can reach us from a frequency point of view is while we're out of body in dream state, in lucid dreams. To me, that's been the clearest indication. You've got to work them out, but it's quite easy when you start to work with it. And it seems pretty logical, what I've experienced with the car, the cage, the tadpole, that the journey is still ongoing. And I don't think it ever stops, but it's time to get into action. So going through the dark night of the soul, and I believe I'm about 300% if we talk it from a cyclical point of view. It's satisfying to realize that all the suffering and heartache and financial loss and losing everything brought me to a point of surrender, to a point of following the divine. In other words, here I am. From that point, I believe you've been there, and this is why you're sitting in that chair, that when we reach that point, life does become glorious. We end up in a euphoric presence of being one with the divine, and it doesn't get any better. So thank you, Brett. I just wanted to share.
Oh,
I went on
thank
a little
you.
bit. If that encourages anybody else who's at that cycle down the bottom. It's simply a cycle, and we will return back to 360 degrees. But the clock and the cycle will be much, much brighter.
Oh, thank you so much, David. An empowering share. Fantastic storytelling as well. Such great eloquence. Thank you so much. Lots to unpack there, and I'm sure those metaphors and symbols will speak to some out there listening. I know the tadpole especially, I sometimes compare this idea of Kundalini awakening being akin to our version of going through the tadpole state to becoming a full-fledged frog. But just most people don't know that we have the potential, right? Most people don't know. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot, David. Vicky here in the chat is sharing as well about surrender and trust, just like David, sharing about the death of her husband, ending up in hospital, feeling terrified and alone and having everything taken away. But then Vicky adds, but there's that tiny light still shining. Love that. Thank you. Thank you. So let's go over here to Teresa. No, Teresa's been waiting a little bit.
Hi, Brent.
Hey, Teresa.
Hey. Yeah. So whenever I had posted earlier about my year of the bounce, that's like my little comedy to it. It was so I came from rough background, the traumatic upbringing, blah, blah, blah. Um, I was having experiences when I was younger, but because of the way I was raised, you didn't talk about that. You didn't ask anybody. There was nobody to talk to about it. You were crazy. I was always told I had a vivid imagination and so I couldn't talk to anybody about it. So fast forward and I am in I'm like 30, 31, and it's like everything hit all at once. And all of that stuff from the past and wondering about, worried about the future and the kids and the family and the marriage and the money and everything hit. And that year, so I was in the psychiatric ward 3 times that year for attempted suicide. The first and third times, honestly, when I look back on it, that was me just doing something just stupid enough to get put away just for a little while to get a vacation. That really was what it was. The second time I wasn't playing, I took 120 pills. And they had even said the only reason I'd survived was because I didn't take it with alcohol because I don't drink, because I don't like alcohol. This was all the medication they had me on. So after that, when I came out of that and I started going to therapy and I was doing that before, but nothing was really working. But I found somebody that she was really good at, I don't know, I guess the way she asked me things got me thinking about them differently, right? But the whole time she always said I had a Zen way of looking at things. And I never understood what she said until I think about 2 years later. I had had some kind of experience. I was driving from a friend's house, and the top of my head felt like it opened up. And I felt like I had 100 people in my car and they were talking to me. It was like they were all talking as one voice. And I could understand everything they were saying. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? I had no idea what was going on. And for about 2 weeks after that, I could hear what people thought, even if they didn't say it out loud. So I kind of thought I was a little bit crazy. But then whenever I was going to my therapist, she had even mentioned, you've had a spiritually transforming experience. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have. I just don't know what context to put it into. And here I am 25 years later, and the experiences keep happening. The dark nights aren't dark anymore. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm riding the roller coaster of life, and what happens, happens. Yes, I can control it, but not necessarily the situation. It's more like I can control my perspective of the situation. So that's what I just focus on, because crap happens, right? That's life. Crap happens all the time. So instead of getting upset about the things or the divorce or the money or the house, which I was crazy at that time. But that's like, it mellowed me out. It's like I got it all out of my system. So as things happen now, I don't like emotionally get wrapped up in it. I just kind of let it go. Okay, what happens, happens. I mean, I put forth the effort that I need to put in it, but I don't worry too much about the outcome. I just focus on what I need to do. So, but yeah, that was my year of the bounce 3 times.
3 bounces. Thank you so much for sharing, Teresa. I really appreciate that. It sounds like you've shared and embodied and integrated expression of how equanimity can look. You don't care about the outcome, you just participate in what you need to participate in. That sounds like quite an empowered way to move through the world. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I see a couple hands, but first I'm going to just jump into the chat here and see how things are going. Noemi is asking here, can you go in and out of the dark night? If so, why does this happen? Tracy adds here, I've surely been in a few of them and am in one now. Each one is less difficult than the last. Yeah, I've found that to be true as well. Each one being less difficult than the last, because each one that we go through, we bring in all the spiritual insights about equanimity into it, right? So we get a little bit on board with the game. Jeff's adding here, went through 3 difficult periods, 6 or 7 years apart each time. And you can kind of look back and see the themes. Yeah. But he agrees with Tracy, they are not as severe as you go on and learn to depend upon life to carry everything. Beautiful. Yeah. So I think they come and go in phases and cycles. And yeah, we could look at it as all one dark night that you kind of revisit, but I like to consider it more as, like I said, the spiraling journey round and around. And so we revisit themes for sure. Lots of support for one another, sharing, being vulnerable. I appreciate you all for holding space for one another. Jeff sharing a powerful quote here by Ramana. The higher power knows what to do and how to do it. Trust it. Love that. Perfect. Yes. Hey, Tirth.
Hi, Brent. Hi, everyone. I wanted to ask you about cannabis. So, you have talked about it. I've seen your video. Like the the Kundalini essentially purifies the system, and it like the cannabis comes in its way. So after I used to smoke weed sometimes, occasionally, but then I stopped after I had a Kundalini awakening because I would smoke and I would have this purges of energy and it would fight the system and I would get very paranoid and I would panic. So I stopped. Then I completely stopped, and after about a month or two, I had intuition to go buy some weed. I don't know why. I was led by intuition, and I went there, and I was seeing the number two, like it's a constant number for me. I was seeing synchronicity, like two 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 two. So this particular weed was $22.20 something. So I was like, yeah, this is the one for me. So I bought the weed, and like I don't know what type of weed it is, but it's like very helpful. Like it like completely like it helps me. Like it works with the system. It helped me move the energy up to my third eye. It opened the third eye. Now it's going to my heart center. Now it's trying to open the heart center. And after smoking the weed, the my intuition would like multiply like tenfold. Like I would have like clear intuition to what to do next. And the synchronicities would multiply after smoking the weed. And also like I would just become like, if I would smoke this weed and I would, there's a park near my house and there's railway tracks at the end of it. I would walk from my home. On the way I'll just take one hit and I'll think to myself that when the train comes, I'll see number, I'll just pick a number, let's say 7. I'll see 7 number on the train, and then I go on the train, and the train will be 777, 777, 277, 377. So it's very crazy. So I did this with my mother also. My mother would come and I would say like, we go to the same park to meditate there, and I would say that we'll go look at the train, and there will be numbers. Like right now I'm seeing 8 because I'm trying to manifest something, and it's coming. Like I'm trying to manifest abundance, and so the 8 is the frequency of abundance. So I'm seeing lots of 8s. So I'll tell my mother that I'm seeing 8 and 6. So I will go there, and when we reach at the park, uh, we will sit there and meditate, and the train will come, and me and my mother will run through the park, and we'll see on the tracks, and the train would be 6886 6886 888 66 888 66 222. And it's crazy. I don't know what to think of it. But also my question was, after my mother has come here from about 15 days now. she came through the synchronicity. I don't know how, but now she's here. And so we meditate every day. Like we go to the park, we have ritual, like we sit there and we meditate. And she's telling me that she's feeling a little bit of energy in her lower back. Something's happened. Like we just sit and meditate. I've done nothing to her. And she's feeling energy moving in her back, and she's feeling energy at the top of her head or on the Sahasrara. And I think she might have a Kundalini awakening. Just, I don't know. I didn't even, how could this happen? Like she's just with me. And even though she is very devotional, so I think she had to have a initiation or something, but I don't know what happened. So how do I guide my mother through this awakening? And what about cannabis? Should I stop consuming cannabis? Or
Smoke weed with your mom.
I did actually.
Nice. Nice.
It was like very hard to, she's a typical Indian mom, so it was very hard to convince her with her conditioning and all. So but she did.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Lots of interesting stuff unfolding for you. Thank you so much for sharing. Remind me of your question.
So the question was, is the weed helping me, or is just my ego like trying to find a way? I like the weed, but it's still like I don't know if I'm just finding a justification for smoking weed, or is it actually?
Yeah, it can definitely help. Definitely help. For some at certain points on the journey. It seems like it is for you appropriate at this point or recently of late. And that's good. If you tune into the energy of the plant, you feel it's the Divine Mother, Mary Jane, right? It's the
Yeah.
Divine Mother. Um, there's a reason that it was smoked by all these yogis and sadhus and whatnot. It can be very, very effective for cultivating meditation and focus inwardly and becoming energetically sensitive. It totally can be, for sure. However, in my experience, and this is my take on it, like you shared, it is helping you to cultivate a heightened sense of intuition. Use that heightened sense of intuition to discern when it is now time to not smoke weed anymore. A time will come where there will be nothing but downsides to it. And so you have to have a very keep a close eye on when that time comes, and pay attention and know that it is not the answer forever and ever. It's the answer for a short time. Eventually, you can become so accustomed to the frequency of it, to the state that it puts you in, that you can induce that state on your own through meditation without all of the downsides of, slow reaction time and paranoia and looking like you're high with your red eyes, all that kind of stuff. You can have the benefits, but you can access just by just shifting to that state of consciousness. So get the frequency of it, become familiar with it, and then figure out how to tap into that when you're sober. It's very, very possible. For me, for example, one of the most powerful Kundalini experiences I had was on weed. And at the end of that experience, which involved all sorts of energetic phenomena and a whole profound opening and all sorts of things, I was told very clearly by the same presence that was guiding me through a profound transformation inwardly. When it was done helping me, which was the Divine Mother, she said very clearly, never smoke weed ever again. And that was it for me, right? That was it. So I agree with you. It was very helpful for me, but at a certain point, I was told point blank, never again. And I imagine that, it's because there's nothing left for me to gain. There's only downsides for me from that point. Now, for those who may be listening, it's very easy, especially with something like weed, to rationalize and justify
Yeah.
smoking it. When I was much younger, I remember every day there's an excuse. Oh, we're gonna watch this movie. We gotta get high. Oh, we've got some good food. We gotta get high. Oh, our friend is leaving for the weekend. My roommate's leaving for the weekend. We better smoke before he leaves. Oh, my friend has come back after the weekend away. Let's smoke to celebrate that he's back. Oh, we have to clean. Let's smoke. Every reason there's reason to smoke. Like, let's be honest. But if we approach it in a ceremonial way, as a ritual, as medicine, we approach it as connecting with the Divine Mother, the plant medicine of it. then you want to use it sparingly, because then the experiences we have can be very, very profound. So that's what I can share about that. Tune in, use the intuition that it's helping you to cultivate, to discern when it's no longer necessary for you. And you'll see eventually, yeah, you'll have to let it go. You'll have to let it go. But if it's working for you, for sure. I mean, all
Yeah,
of
it's
it
working
is
for me.
all of it is God, right? All of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you so much for sharing. I'm fascinated by the experiences you're having with your mom. She sounds pretty cool. That's awesome. Teresa says, I was stoned when the top of my head opened up. Interesting. And is sharing here, yes, in sacred spiritual settings, it's much better, right? David's sharing here, it can naturally happen with a genuine desire to serve. Yeah. Hey, Leah.
Hey Brent, hey everybody. Just want to hop in here. Just when Toth was sharing with his question about the weed and all the questions that come up on this path, and I just want to share um, that for me, when I truly kind of locked in with Divine Mother, because she too is my gal friend, as well as other guides, but when I truly came to the place of asking her everything, like, should I go to the store today? And it's like, you know, to ask, she will answer. When we ask for help for anything at all from the divine or you guides or any, whatever that is for you, they answer. And what helps me too is if I actually write the question and then she answers in writing, like it'll just write out um, whether to do something or not. And sometimes I don't, I need affirmation, or I need confirmation if my intuition is saying something. So um, I'll also, I'm just going to write here because it's kind of near me all the time. It's just a little pendulum here. And there's a yes and a no. You can ask it a question too, and there's a yes and a no that comes from the deep intuition about what's right for you. And I use that too, especially when it comes to past lives when they come up, and wanting to be curious about that. So those are just a couple of tools that, well, more than a tool, asking Ma, but she really is. I'm surrender. She is my guide, and mother and lover and everything. So yeah, just ask her, about the weed if you're not sure. She'll tell you anything.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaliyah. Yeah, it sounds like you have a very intimate relationship with Ma.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful relationship. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I see here Colin as well was responding on the topic of weed. Colin shares, all of my major breakthroughs came when I stopped smoking cannabis and was completely sober. Right on. Yeah, it can also, of course, just dull us down to the point where we have no, um, you know, concentration ability or, to go into meditation. It can help, but it can also hinder for sure. It's a fine balance. Noemi is sharing here, had my Kundalini high off cannabis, and after I swear I was high off the energy and the weed was blasted out of my system for real. It was good to smoke for a bit before this happened. Had nice spiritual experiences, but it doesn't feel very good anymore. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, so here in Canada, it's completely legal. There's like you can buy it at the store, you can buy all sorts of different drinks and gummy bears and all this kind of stuff. And I was just thinking, with this legalization, I was imagining that a lot more people are going to be having spiritual experiences as a result of, smoking weed just to hang out on the weekend or whatever. Um, seems like some of us are having those experiences here. So I think maybe a stretch, but I think maybe that also coincides with this idea of the ascension and the accelerated awakening that's happening on the planet. Just more and more people are having these experiences, and legalization of something like, so powerful as weed can really help with the spiritual awakening. But of course, it can also hinder. I know many people that struggle with it. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I'm gonna begin to wind down here and get to bed. Maybe some of us need a nightcap. If you'd like to support me by making a donation, I really appreciate that. And those that have donated, thank you so much. It really goes a long way. It really does. So thank you. I've got a course if you're feeling ungrounded, you're working through a spiritual emergency or crisis and looking for integration. You can visit my website, brentspirit.com, to find my course. It's called Grounded. I've got some meetings available if you'd like to meet with me one-on-one. Some time slots open on my calendar. If you haven't already, check out the older episodes on my channel as well. I've got an episode about cannabis where I talk about half an hour about it or so. Things like that. A lot of interesting talks. Check it out if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for your shares today, your vulnerability, your support. So much value, so much value. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you. BrentSpirit.com. Check it all out. Like, subscribe, comment for those that have done all that already. I really appreciate you. I really do. Thank you so much. Get some sleep, everybody. Good night now. Bye-bye.